Glad you're here for Unintended Consequences, episode 64 for July 20th, 2026. Starting the week with a case study you'll be thinking about for days. Malcolm McLean's shipping container slashed the cost of moving goods worldwide and emptied the working waterfronts that had sustained port cities for generations. On an April morning in 1956, the converted tanker Ideal X left Newark for Houston carrying 58 aluminum boxes lashed to its deck. Those boxes were not yet the standardized steel units that would later dominate trade, but they already showed how a single lift could replace dozens of individual handlings. Within a decade, those boxes had cut the cost of loading a ton of cargo from roughly $5 to less than 50 cents. To see what that shift actually meant, consider that break bulk handling had previously accounted for roughly half the total expense of ocean transport. Removing most of that labor turned a process measured in days of crew time into one measured in minutes of crane time. Yet the same innovation that made every port cheaper to use also made most of the old piers and the neighborhoods around them unnecessary, because the savings only appeared once the surrounding infrastructure itself was rebuilt from the ground up. Malcolm McLean was a North Carolina trucker who spent the early 1950s watching freight sit for days at the docks while longshore gangs manhandled individual crates, barrels, and bales. He believed that if cargo could move directly from truck to ship without being touched by hand, the entire economy would benefit from lower prices and faster delivery. At the time, break bulk handling consumed roughly half the cost of ocean transport and tied up vessels for weeks in port, so any reduction in that fraction translated directly into fewer idle ship days and lower delivered prices for everything from textiles to machinery. McLean's company, Sea Land Service, treated the container as a simple extension of the highway trailer, a steel box that could be lifted, stacked, and forgotten until it reached its destination. Port authorities and shipping lines welcomed the idea because it promised to restore American competitiveness against foreign fleets that still relied on cheap manual labor. The logic was straightforward. Anything that reduced friction in the movement of goods would raise real incomes for everyone, since the arithmetic of lower handling costs would, in principle, leave more money in the hands of both shippers and consumers. The Ideal X sailed in 1956 with a deck load of containers. By 1966, Sealand was running weekly service between the U.S. East Coast and Europe, which meant that the original experiment with 58 boxes had scaled into a regular schedule that no longer depended on the speed of human gangs. The U.S. military adopted the system during the Vietnam buildup, proving that standardized boxes could be handled by cranes rather than gangs of men. And that proof removed one of the last practical objections to investing in the new equipment. Major ports raced to install the new gantry cranes and to dredge deeper channels for the larger vessels that containers made economical. Early reports from the Port of New York Authority celebrated the drop in vessel turnaround time from 10 days to 18 hours, a compression that multiplied the number of voyages a single ship could complete each year. Skeptics in the International Longshoremen's Association warned that the boxes would eliminate thousands of jobs, but the visible savings on freight rates, sometimes 90% on high-volume routes, overwhelmed most objections because those percentage reductions showed up immediately on invoices, while the job losses accumulated more gradually. Within 15 years, the container had become the global standard. The same cranes and boxes that cut handling costs also required wide aprons, deep water, and vast paved yards for stacking. Piers built for break bulk cargo, narrow finger piers along Manhattan, the London docks, the waterfront of San Francisco, could not accommodate the new equipment or the 1,000-foot ships that soon followed, because those older structures lacked both the horizontal space for crane rails and the vertical clearance beneath the booms. Ports therefore migrated to greenfield sites, Newark and Elizabeth in New Jersey, Felixstowe in Britain, Rotterdam's Maasvlakte. Employment on the old waterfront collapsed. New York longshore work fell from roughly 30,000 registered workers in the late 1950s to fewer than 10,000 by the mid-1970s. which represented a reduction of more than two-thirds even as the volume of cargo passing through the region continued to rise. Neighborhoods that had grown up around daily hiring halls, taverns, and small warehouses lost their economic base because the daily cash economy of casual labor had depended on the physical presence of thousands of men moving goods one piece at a time. The second order effect was spatial. Container terminals needed hundreds of acres of flat land near deep water, pushing facilities far from city centers and severing the direct link between dock work and urban residents. A third order effect followed. The very efficiency that lowered consumer prices concentrated remaining port activity in a handful of megaports, leaving secondary cities with abandoned infrastructure and shrinking tax bases even as national trade volumes soared. City governments responded by rezoning derelict piers for offices, parks, and housing. London's Docklands, New York's Battery Park City, San Francisco's Embarcadero. These conversions created new amenities but rarely restored the volume of middle-skill employment that had once existed, because the new land uses relied on different skill sets and far fewer workers per acre. The container industry itself continued to consolidate. Today, roughly 20 ports handle the majority of global container traffic, which means the same logic that once favored a few large sites has now narrowed the field still further. Some former dock communities have seen partial revival through tourism and logistics-adjacent services, yet the original dense ecology of casual labor and small suppliers never returned. Modern automation, remote-controlled cranes, and automated stacking yards is repeating the same pattern at an even larger scale, because each new reduction in labor again rewards facilities that can be built or retrofitted at the greatest possible distance from older urban cores. A productivity leap that removes friction from one part of a system can render entire local economies obsolete when those economies were built around the friction itself. Efficiency gains therefore require deliberate attention to the places and skills they displace, rather than the assumption that lower costs will automatically lift every participant. The question for any new infrastructure or platform is not only how much cheaper it makes the next transaction, but which communities lose the ability to participate in transactions at all once the old method disappears. We'll leave it there for today. Thanks for thinking through this one with me. If you know someone who loves a good cautionary tale, send it their way, and I'll see you tomorrow with another. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nara Network. Links in the show notes. One more thing, if you liked today's episode, our sister show First Principles Daily is worth a spot in your feed. Reasoning from raw materials, not analogy, on the breakthroughs that actually cut cost. It's one of the Nara Network's daily briefings, all free at naranetwork.com. Prefer reading? Today's full write-up, sources, and transcript are on the episode blog at naranetwork.com. Same briefing, readable format. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.